Part 1, Growing Up Invisible. Mia Thompson had always been the forgotten one. In a family of 5 children, she was the youngest and somehow the least seen. Her 4 older siblings, Leonardo, Fernando, Beatriz, and Gustavo, were all celebrated in their own ways. Leonardo was the golden child, excelling at sports and destined for greatness. Fernando was the charmer, effortlessly winning over everyone he met. Beatriz was the perfectionist, her achievements meticulously documented by their proud parents. And even Gustavo, the baby before Mia came along, had carved out his niche as the funny one. But Mia, she was just there. From as far back as she could remember, Mia felt like an outsider in her own home. It wasn't that her family actively mistreated her, they simply didn't notice her enough to include her in anything meaningful. The first time this became painfully clear was when Leonardo got married. Mia was 10 years old then, and though she understood why children weren't invited to weddings, it still stung. Leonardo's bride was kind, someone Mia genuinely liked, but she hadn't been allowed to attend the ceremony or celebrate with the rest of the family. Instead, she watched through the living room window as cars pulled away, taking her family to a joyous event she would never experience. When Fernando married 2 years later, the pattern repeated itself. By now, Mia had learned not to ask questions. At 12, she was well-behaved, quiet, and resigned to being left behind. Still, each exclusion chipped away at her sense of belonging. Things reached a breaking point when Beatriz announced her engagement. For once, Beatriz seemed hesitant about hosting a child-free wedding, but under pressure from their parents and the rest of the family, she caved. When Mia mustered the courage to ask if she could be the exception after all, she was 15 now, practically an adult. Beatriz flatly refused. It wouldn't be fair to the other kids, she said dismissively, as though fairness mattered more than her sister's feelings. The rejection hit hard. Mia yelled, cried, and accused her family of treating her unfairly. Her outburst earned her 6 months of grounding, during which she spent most of her time locked in her room, nursing her hurt pride and scribbling angry poems in a notebook no one else ever read. Writing became her refuge, a way to process emotions too big for a household that barely acknowledged them. By the time Gustavo tied the knot, Mia was 17 and numb to the whole ordeal. She didn't bother asking this time. Sure enough, her cousin a year older than her was invited, while Mia received nothing but a curt text message informing her of the date. She sent a perfunctory congratulations and moved on, retreating further into herself and spending every spare moment with Alex, her high school sweetheart and future fiancé. He listened when no one else did, offering comfort without judgment. Looking back, Mia realized these moments weren't isolated incidents, they were part of a larger cycle. A cycle where her needs were ignored, her presence overlooked, and her worth diminished. And as much as she tried to convince herself otherwise, those wounds never fully healed. They festered quietly, waiting for the day she'd find the strength to break free. Part 2, Choosing Her Path. Mia's decision to exclude her family from her wedding wasn't made lightly. It was the culmination of years of hurt, resentment, and unanswered questions. But as she stood on the brink of starting her own life with Alex, she realized this was her chance to break free from the cycle of neglect that had defined her childhood. She didn't want to carry the weight of their dismissive behavior into her marriage. This was her moment to take control. When Mia first told Alex about her plan, he listened quietly, his expression thoughtful but supportive. "Do you think they'll understand?" he asked cautiously. Mia shook her head. "They won't. They've never understood how it felt to be left out. But I don't need their understanding anymore. I just need to do what's right for me." The invitations went out, a small, intimate guest list filled with people who truly mattered, close friends, a few cousins who had always been kind to her, and Alex's warm, loving family. Not once did Mia consider adding her siblings or parents. To her, it wasn't an act of revenge, it was an act of self-respect. It didn't take long for her family to notice their absence from the guest list. Beatriz was the first to comment in the family group chat, her tone laced with passive aggression. "Is there a problem with the mail? I haven't received my invitation yet." Fernando, ever the blunt one, followed up with a direct question, "Why didn't I get an invite?" Mia read the messages in silence, her jaw tightening with each word. She ignored them all. There was no point in engaging, they wouldn't understand, and she refused to justify herself to people who had never valued her feelings. The next day, her mother called. As soon as Mia answered, her mom launched into a tirade. "Mariana, why aren't your siblings invited to your wedding? What is going on? Is this some kind of joke?" Her voice was sharp, accusatory, as if Mia had committed a crime. Mia took a deep breath, steadying herself. Mom, they didn't invite me to their weddings, she said calmly. I thought it was fair to return the favor. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then her mother exploded. What are you talking about? That was different. You were just a child back then. It wasn't personal. And now look at you acting like a stranger. Has Alex put these ideas into your head? Mia almost laughed at the absurdity of her mother's response. Of course, it was easier to blame someone else than to confront the truth. This isn't about Alex, Mom. This is my decision. They never made me feel important enough to include me in their most special moments. So why should they be part of mine? Her mother hung up without another word, leaving Mia staring at her phone. It was typical her family always preferred dramatic exits over honest conversations. But Mia felt a strange sense of relief. For once, she hadn't backed down. She had spoken her truth, even if they refused to hear it. The messages kept coming. Leonardo sent a lengthy text trying to guilt trip her. Mariana, I know you felt hurt about not being invited to my wedding, but you were just a kid. It wasn't personal. I thought you would have gotten over it by now. His words stung, but not because they were true, they weren't. They stung because he still couldn't see her pain as valid. She replied tersely, It's not about getting over it. It's about fairness. If I wasn't important enough to be at your weddings, why should you be at mine? His response came quickly, dripping with condescension. You're being ridiculous, Mariana. Family should always come before resentment. You're acting like a spoiled brat. His words hit a nerve, but Mia refused to let them derail her. She deleted the message and turned off her phone. She didn't owe him or anyone else an explanation. Things escalated when her parents decided to stage an intervention. They showed up unannounced at Mia's apartment, barging in as if they owned the place. Her mom immediately launched into a lecture. What will people think of us, Mariana? What kind of person doesn't invite their own siblings to their wedding? Do you realize how embarrassing this is? Mia stared at her, incredulous. Embarrassing? Really, Mom? You're worried about what people will think? Not about how I felt growing up, being excluded from everything that mattered to you. Her father chimed in, his voice gruff. This is childish and selfish, Mariana. You're holding on to something that happened years ago. Let it go? That was the final straw. Mia snapped, childish and selfish. I was a child when I begged to go to their weddings, and you all told me I was being dramatic. Now, as an adult, you expect me to pretend it never happened. Well, I'm sorry, but I'm not changing my mind. They're not coming to my wedding. And if you keep treating me like this, neither are you. The room fell silent. Her mother looked like she might faint, and her father's face turned bright red. Without another word, they stormed out, slamming the door behind them. In the weeks that followed, the criticism intensified. Beatrice tried to appeal to Mia's emotions, claiming her nephews were excited about the wedding and it would be cruel to leave them out. Fernando accused her of ruining the family, but Mia remained steadfast. She ignored their attempts to manipulate her, focusing instead on planning the wedding she had always dreamed of, a celebration filled with love, laughter, and people who genuinely cared about her. On the day of the wedding, as Mia walked down the aisle toward Alex, she felt an overwhelming sense of peace. For the first time in her life, she had created something entirely her own, untainted by her family's toxic influence. As they danced together under twinkling lights, surrounded by warmth and joy, Mia knew she had made the right choice. Later, she found out her mother had organized a separate dinner for her siblings on the same day, a pathetic attempt at a silent protest. But it didn't matter. Nothing could diminish the liberation Mia felt in standing up for herself. This was her life now, and she was finally free. Part 3, a celebration of authenticity. The day of Mia's wedding arrived, and everything felt different, lighter, freer. For the first time in her life, she wasn't walking into an event where she felt like an outsider or an afterthought. This was her moment, crafted entirely on her terms. The venue was a cozy beachside garden decorated with handmade touches that reflected who she and Alex were as individuals and as a couple. Twinkling fairy lights hung from tree branches, casting a warm glow over the space. The flowers were simple but vibrant, chosen not because they matched some societal standard of elegance, but because they made Mia smile. As guests mingled under the starlit sky, laughter filled the air. There were no pretenses here, just genuine affection and joy. Mia's closest friends gave heartfelt speeches, sharing stories about her resilience, creativity, and humor. One friend joked about how Mia had once written a poem comparing her family drama to a Shakespearean tragedy. which earned loud laughs from the crowd. It was a stark contrast to the stiff formality of her siblings' weddings, where every detail had been curated to impress rather than connect. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to Mia, her family hosts their own gathering, a lavish brunch designed to serve as both a celebration and a silent protest. Her mother insisted it was for appearances, claiming they couldn't let the community think they weren't supportive of Mia. But the truth was uglier. It was a way to assert control, to remind themselves that they still mattered, even if Mia refused to acknowledge them. Photos of the event were posted online, captioned with vague, yet pointed comments like, "Family always comes first," and "Thinking about Mariana today." They hoped these posts would reach her, hoping to guilt her into reconsidering her choices. But Mia didn't see any of it. She had long since blocked her family from her social media accounts, creating a protective barrier between herself and their toxicity. What she didn't know wouldn't hurt her, and besides, she was too busy soaking in the love surrounding her. As she danced with Alex, surrounded by people who truly cared about her, she realized something profound. This wasn't just her wedding, it was the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where she finally took up space, where she was seen and valued for exactly who she was. Later that evening, as Mia sat at a table chatting with her cousin Sophia, someone mentioned seeing pictures of her family's brunch online. Sophia hesitated before speaking, unsure whether to bring it up. "Mia, I heard, well, your mom apparently threw this big thing today, like a wedding brunch. People are saying it's kind of weird." Mia raised an eyebrow, unbothered. "Let them have their brunch. Honestly, I don't care what they do anymore. This is my day, and it's perfect without them." Sophia nodded, clearly relieved by Mia's calm response. "You're right. And honestly, their stuff looks so forced. Yours feels real. Everyone here loves you, Mia. That's what matters." That comment stuck with Mia throughout the night. As she looked around at the faces of her friends and Alex's family, she realized how much lighter she felt knowing she hadn't compromised her values for anyone. These were the people who showed up for her not out of obligation, but because they genuinely cared. In the days following the wedding, however, the peace Mia had found began to erode slightly. Indirect jabs started appearing in the family group chat, which she had left, but Sophia kept her updated on. Beatrice led the charge, commenting on how basic the flowers looked in the photos Mia's friends had shared. Fernando chimed in, mocking the venue as looking more like an impromptu party than a proper wedding. None of them seemed to grasp the irony that they were criticizing something they hadn't even attended, something they weren't invited to because of their own actions. It infuriated Mia, though she tried to brush it off. How dare they critique her wedding after deliberately excluding her from theirs? Where she discovered through Sophia that they had obtained the photos through mutual acquaintances, invading a moment Mia had intentionally kept private. Their behavior only reinforced her decision to cut ties that was clear they hadn't changed and likely never would. The final blow came when her mother called. Without preamble, her mom launched into a tirade about how disappointing the wedding had been. "Mariana, I saw the pictures and honestly, I expected more from you. Everything looked so simple. Nothing like your siblings' weddings. That dress you deserve something glamorous. Why didn't you have it in a church? Your sister had such a beautiful ceremony. Yours didn't seem worthy of our family." For a moment, Mia was speechless, not because she agreed, but because she couldn't believe her mother's audacity. When she finally spoke, her voice was icy. "Mom, the only thing that wasn't worthy here was you weren't even invited. You feel entitled to criticize me. If you didn't like what you saw, fine, but I didn't plan anything to please you." Her mother grew angrier, accusing Mia of being selfish and abandoning her family for Alex. "Do you really think you can just cut us out of your life? That's not normal, Mariana. You've always been resentful, and now you're taking it out on us. What did we do to deserve this?" That was the last straw. Mia snapped. "What did you do? Let's refresh your memory, Mom. You ignored me during the most important moments of my life. I was never important enough to be at my own siblings' weddings. But now you expect me to include you in mine as if nothing happened. That's hypocrisy. And the most ironic thing, the only thing that could have ruined my wedding was inviting you." There was silence on the other end of the line. For a brief second, Mia thought maybe her mother finally understood. But then her mom replied with venomous contempt, "You're ungrateful. We did everything for you, and this is how you repay us. You're abandoning your family for a man who barely came into your life. You'll regret this." Mia hung up before her mother could say another word. She was done arguing with someone who refused to take responsibility for their mistakes. Over the next few days, her siblings joined the fray, bombarding her with messages in the family group chat. Beatriz accused her of destroying the family. Fernando declared she'd lost everything for a man. Mia read it all silently, feeling the weight of their words but refusing to engage. After a few minutes, she left the chat without replying. It wasn't worth it. When her mother showed up unannounced at her door a few days later, yelling about how family was forever and Mia couldn't just eliminate them, Mia opened the door just wide enough to deliver her final verdict. Family should mean support, respect, and love, not manipulation and constant criticism. If that's all you have to offer, then yes, I can eliminate you from my life. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. She closed the door while her mother continued yelling, but Mia didn't pay attention. She had already made her decision. From that moment forward, she cut off all contact with them. The few times they tried to reach out afterward, it was with more accusations and criticism, but Mia no longer had the patience for it. Her life was focused on herself, Alex, and the future they were building together. For the first time, she felt truly free. Part 4, Building a New Life. The news of Mia's pregnancy brought an unexpected wave of emotions, joy, excitement, and a deep sense of responsibility. For the first time in her life, she felt truly in control of her future. She and Alex were determined to create a loving, supportive environment for their child, one free from the toxicity that had defined Mia's own upbringing. They spent hours discussing how they would raise their baby, vowing to prioritize kindness, respect, and unconditional love above all else. But as much as Mia tried to focus on this new chapter, her family's presence loomed like a shadow. News of her pregnancy spread quickly, reaching them through distant relatives or mutual acquaintances. It didn't take long before messages began flooding in, each one more manipulative than the last. Her mother was the first to reach out, sending a carefully worded text, "Mariana, I heard you're pregnant. I want you to know that despite everything, we're your family, and it's important for the baby to have grandparents around." Mia stared at the message, her stomach tightening. She didn't respond. She and Alex had already discussed this. They wouldn't allow her family anywhere near their child. It wasn't about cruelty, it was about protection. Mia couldn't risk exposing her baby to the same emotional games and criticism she had endured her entire life. Her siblings weren't far behind. Beatrice sent a saccharine message filled with thinly veiled guilt trips. "Congratulations on the pregnancy, Mariana. Despite all the fights, we're siblings and I know you'll need support. We're here for you and the baby." Fernando took a more direct approach. "Hold on to your grudge if you want, but at least let us meet our nephew. He deserves to know he has a big family." Each message chipped away at Mia's resolve, not because she doubted her decision, but because they reminded her of the pain she had worked so hard to leave behind. She read them silently while Alex watched, his expression calm but protective. When she finished, he reached over and took her hand. "You don't have to reply," he said gently. "You don't owe them anything. This is our moment, and we only need those who truly care about us." He was right. Still, it wasn't easy to ignore the barrage of attempts to reconnect. Her family seemed determined to wear her down, bombarding her with private messages, calls, and even visits. One afternoon, her mother showed up unannounced at their apartment. Mia opened the door just wide enough to see her standing there, her face etched with what looked like regret, but Mia knew better. Before her mother could speak, Mia cut her off. "Mom, don't insist. You're not a part of my life, and you won't be a part of my child's life either." Her mother's eyes widened in shock. "Mariana, you can't do this. We're your family. This baby is part of us too." Mia's voice remained steady, though her heart raced. "I'm not going to let my child go through what I went through. I want them to grow up surrounded by true love without manipulation, without criticism, without emotional games. That's something you and the others never knew how to offer." Her mother started to cry, tears streaming down her face, but Mia didn't soften. She had seen those tears too many times before. They weren't genuine remorse. They were a tactic, a way to get what she wanted. Without another word, Mia closed the door, leaving her mother standing on the other side. It was painful, but it was necessary. In the days that followed, the messages and attempts at contact continued, but they no longer affected her. Mia had made her decision and she stood by it. Her focus now was on her pregnancy, her husband, and the baby on the way. Together, they planned everything with so much love and care, choosing names, decorating the nursery, attending parenting classes. Every decision was infused with joy and intention, a stark contrast to the chaos and neglect Mia had experienced growing up. Some people might call her decision selfish, keeping her family away from her child. But for Mia, it wasn't about punishment, it was about protection. She refused to allow any toxic influence near her baby. Today, she was at peace with her choice. She knew her child would grow up in a safe and loving home, surrounded by people who truly cared. and that was all that mattered. As her due date approached, Mia found herself reflecting on how far she'd come. Cutting ties with her family hadn't been easy, but it had been liberating. For the first time, she felt in control of her life and the life she was about to bring into the world. She imagined holding her baby for the first time, whispering promises of unconditional love and support. No matter what challenges lay ahead, she knew she and Alex would face them together, united in their commitment to breaking the cycle. And that, she realized, was the greatest gift she could give her child, a fresh start, untainted by the past. Part 5, Finding Peace. Years passed, and Mia's life transformed in ways she had once only dreamed of. Her daughter, Lily, grew into a spirited, confident child who thrived under the loving guidance of her parents. From the moment Lily was born, Mia poured everything she had into creating a home filled with warmth, laughter, and unconditional support. There were no harsh words, no dismissive gestures, only patience, encouragement, and affection. Watching Lily explore the world with such curiosity and joy made every difficult decision Mia had ever made worth it. Lily was the spitting image of her mother, with the same dark curls and expressive eyes, but her personality leaned more toward Alex's easygoing charm. At 5 years old, she already showed signs of inheriting both her parents' passions. She loved drawing pictures of their family, often adding little captions that made Mia laugh out loud. "This is me, mommy, daddy, and our happy house," one read, accompanied by stick figures holding hands beneath a bright yellow sun. Another declared, "We are the best team." It was clear that Lily understood the value of connection, a lesson Mia had worked hard to instill in her. Occasionally, Mia would receive messages from her family, emails or texts sent through mutual acquaintances, always worded carefully to avoid outright confrontation. Her mother still tried to guilt trip her, writing things like, "Your father isn't getting any younger. Don't you think it's time for forgiveness?" Beatrice occasionally slipped in comments about how much Lily resembled her side of the family, as if blood alone should be enough to earn her place in Lily's life. But Mia never responded. She didn't need to. She knew deep down that her decision had been the right one. What amazed Mia most was how little those attempts affected her now. In the early days after cutting ties, each message had stirred up old wounds, forcing her to relive years of neglect and rejection. But over time, those feelings faded, replaced by a quiet certainty that she had done what was best not just for herself, but for Lily too. Her family might claim they wanted to reconnect for the sake of their granddaughter, but Mia saw through their excuses. Their interest wasn't rooted in love, it was rooted in obligation and pride, and she refused to let them near her daughter. One evening, as Mia tucked Lily into bed, her daughter looked up at her with wide, curious eyes. "Mommy, why don't I have grandparents like my friends?" The question caught Mia off guard, but she smiled softly, brushing a strand of hair from Lily's forehead. "Well, sweetheart, sometimes families are complicated. My family, well, we didn't always get along very well. So instead, I decided to focus on building a new family with Daddy, you and me. We're our own special team." Lily tilted her head thoughtfully. "But wouldn't it be nice to have more people who love us?" Mia hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "It's not about having lots of people around, Lil. It's about having people who truly care about you. You have me, Daddy, Aunt Sophia, Uncle Marcus, and all your friends. That's what matters. Love doesn't come from being related. It comes from being kind, supportive, and present." Lily seemed satisfied with this answer, nodding sleepily before pulling her stuffed bunny closer. "Okay, Mommy, I love you." "I love you too, sweetheart," Mia whispered, kissing her forehead. As she turned off the light and closed the door behind her, she felt a surge of gratitude for Lily, for Alex, and for the life they had built together. They weren't perfect, but they were whole, and that was enough. In the years that followed, Mia found solace in writing again, channeling her experiences into something meaningful. She began working on a memoir, chronicling her journey from feeling invisible to reclaiming her sense of self-worth. Writing became therapeutic, allowing her to process the pain of her past while celebrating the joy of her present. When the book was finally published, it resonated deeply with readers who had faced similar struggles within their own families. The title, Breaking the Cycle, reflected not just Mia's personal triumph, but also the universal hope of breaking free from toxic patterns and forging a better path forward. At book signings and speaking events, strangers approached her with tears in their eyes, thanking her for putting into words what they had long felt but couldn't articulate. For Mia, these moments were profoundly fulfilling. They reminded her that her story wasn't just hers, it belonged to Anyone brave enough to stand up for themselves and create a life rooted in authenticity and love. On a crisp autumn afternoon, several years after Lily's birth, Mia sat in a cozy cafe with Alex sipping coffee and flipping through the latest draft of her second book. Across the table, Alex grinned at her. You've come so far, Mia. Look at you, author, amazing mom, wife extraordinaire. Who would have thought? Mia laughed, shaking her head. Not me, that's for sure, but honestly, none of this would have happened if I hadn't decided to break away from the cycle. Sometimes letting go of the past is the only way to move forward. Alex reached across the table, squeezing her hand, and look where it got you. A life full of love, purpose, and happiness. You deserve every bit of it. As they left the cafe hand in hand, Mia glanced back at the bustling crowd inside, thinking about how far she'd come since those lonely days of feeling unseen. She wasn't the same person anymore, and neither was her family, even if they didn't realize it. By choosing to step away, she had broken the chain of dysfunction that had bound them for generations. Now she was free to define her legacy on her own terms, one built on love, respect, and the courage to start anew. When they arrived home, Lily greeted them at the door, clutching a picture she had drawn earlier that day. Look, Mommy, it's our family. The drawing depicted three stick figures holding hands beneath a rainbow with the caption scrolled proudly across the top, We are happy forever. Mia knelt down, hugging her daughter tightly. That's right, Lil, we are. And for the first time in her life, Mia truly believed it.